Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's installation of International Affairs, broadcasting live from Dhaka's Gulshan studio. And of course, there are many interesting topics that I will bring forward to our viewers who are watching here at home and also abroad. Today is, of course, 28th December. We have almost three more days left before geopolitics accelerates into 2026. U.S. President Donald Trump meets Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky today in a high-stakes bid to shape a peace plan for the Russia-Ukraine war. Of course, this meeting is set to take place in Florida as far as the media outlets are reporting. And of course, not but the least, Myanmar begins elections under military rule as civil war continues. Thailand and Cambodia activate a fragile ceasefire after deadly border clashes over the last 3 weeks. Russia and North Korea signal deeper strategic alignment while China sets its political calendar for the year 2026, underscoring that the world enters the new year with wars unresolved, alliances shifting and diplomacy under strain. Of course, this is International Affairs. We'll be touching all of these topics. But before I begin, let me introduce all of our panelists here today. In the studio, we have John Dalton, who joins us as international consultant, who's, of course, appeared on this show many times in the past, as well as Norman Floyd Barnes, who is, of course, SATV's geopolitical correspondent, joining us from Washington, D.C. I want to begin the topic of discussion today with the Russia-Ukraine war. We know that Russia is continuing its large aerial attacks on the capital city of Kiev in Ukraine, and it's also damaging infrastructure and leaving many without heating in this vast coldness of December that it brings. I know that it's just been Christmas weekend that has gone by. It's a holiday festive season, but Donald Trump has chosen this very moment to discuss with the leader of Ukraine, because in the past he has discussed this war in terms with Vladimir Putin of Russia. So this time around, how they are going to get a benefit from this, and what is the 20-point peace plan that the two leaders are going to talk about? I want to begin with John Dalton. How are you seeing this issue?
Well, I think it's a little bit more optimistic than we've had in the past, because I think that apparently Ukraine is open to some sort of a concessional approach to at least two of the oblasts on the eastern coast. And that if Kherson and Donetsk in the Donbass region, they can reach some accommodation, whether it's a demilitarized zone or whether it's some sort of an economic area that's in Ukraine geographically, but under the control, let's say, of the resident population, which is largely ethnic Russian. I think the other two districts that are in contention, I don't think the Ukraine people are prepared to give those up quite so easily. The Donbass for many, many years has been a Russian enclave, ethnically Russian enclave. Right. And so while there's a matter of pride to be dealt with, I think that that will be the most important discussion, as well as the long-term security guarantees that Ukraine will need to make sure that those two eastern oblasts or regions do not sort of like seep over into Ukraine itself anymore. So, but I think that we have to have, it's more optimistic today than it was yesterday. It seems like Zelensky is going with an open mind and is coming to talk to these situations with Trump. I hope they don't pull the chair out from under him and like give him something that he wasn't prepared for when he comes to the meeting in the White House. But there's no question that that things seem to be on a different track. Whether it's the right track or whether it's going to be a solution, no one can say. But I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was, let's say, last week.
Correct. I mean, we understand that some of these talks between the two leaders would include political concessions and, of course, support from the reconstruction of Ukraine, some of the parts that have been damaged from aerial bombardment of the Russian military forces. Yeah. I want to join with Norman Floyd Barnes from Washington, D.C. I know that U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled for many of these meetings. Today, he is going to be meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and as well on early next week, he's meeting Benjamin Netanyahu to understand the U.S. engagement in Middle Eastern issues. I mean, I understand it's the end of the year, and all of these issues do require some kind of footnote before we can progress onto a more steadier 2026. This year has shown the entire globe and the entire humanity that war is one of the most profitable businesses out there. And I say this with notice to that conditions of war of course, take many livelihoods of many nations and, of course, various cultural backgrounds. I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. I want your take on how you see United States politics and how it is dealing with the entire worldly issues that it contributes to. Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes.
Yes, good morning from Washington. Uh, Today is Sunday here, and Monday we look forward to some type of answers as Mr. Trump and the president of Ukraine have a discussion about the movement in terms of the war. Right now, we're looking at setting up a framework, the United States government, on what agenda, what issues we're going to address coming into the 2026. This year is pretty much has been is finished. Not much is going to happen. We are still dealing with the issue of how we're going to address the government, how we're going to address the U.S. involvement in Venezuela. And as you know, on Christmas Day, we had a attack on the terrorist group ISIS in the country of Nigeria. So we must look at these issues and see exactly which way we're going. We're going to a more aggressive way in terms of our global response to issues of terrorism, issues of drugs, issues of crime, and the most important, how do we deal with war? Ukraine and Russia, hopefully we will have some type of answers before the end of this year regarding what path are we going to take with that. And also the same thing with Gaza and Israel. We have to come to some type of framework on how we're going to address it going into 2026. I do not believe that we're going to have the same situation in 2026 as we had in 2025 in regarding to the United States global footprint. You will see a more focused approach to doing things globally. There'll be more decisiveness in terms of our government response to different things. And this back and forth, hot and cold situation, I think it's going to end, and we'll see a more planned approach to different things and more responsibility being shifted to Europe and other places on dealing with their issues, and the United States is going to take a different approach to dealing with global issues.
Of course, a very wonderful roundabout of the issues that pertain to the global news. I enjoy Norman Floyd Barnes' take on this matter. There is one of the news that Mr. Norman had pointed out. Of course, a Christmas present, that was the word that Donald Trump used as he struck a terrorist ISIS group in Nigeria. So not only so, just a few days ago in Syria, we've seen 2 U.S. Soldiers being killed, and as a result, Donald Trump had issued the same kind of order or same kind of threat that they will be handled with an iron fist. So once again, the timing of these events, and not only so, Norman was saying how the U.S.-Venezuela relationships are on the rise, the tensions that come from the two sides. I know that for a fact that 3 oil tankers have been intercepted in that ocean in the Caribbean Sea. All of these look forward to more destabilizing the region, in my opinion. I want to take or understand how you felt about it, given that you have enormous experience working with various global economies.
Well, I think the situation, as we've said before, the situation in Venezuela is really predicated on the control of the oil. And that the United States will say it also includes trafficking in individuals and also fentanyl and other kind of narco activities. But at the base of it, it's going to be about oil. That's why they're intercepting all of these tankers that are part of the ghost fleet of Venezuela. They're not traveling under a Venezuela flag. They're traveling under some other country's flag or no flag at all. So that intercepting them, if they can find them in a vast, it's a vast ocean, but if they can stop them from exporting oil, that will hamstring the Venezuelan economy. They do so, however, at great risk of alienating China and alienating Russia. And that part of the war, that part of the oil war, if you will, needs to be watched very, very carefully. I hope Norman is correct that there'll be a more strategic approach in 2026, that people will start taking action specifically targeted on certain goals and not sort of like all over the place. But that Venezuela situation, I think, all comes right down to the financial, economic interests of the United States vis-a-vis Venezuela. And they would like Maduro to be removed from office by any means. Let's see. They have all started now to invoke the Monroe Doctrine, which is an old standard that anything that happens in the Western Hemisphere is United States interest. And so we'll see whether they can use that as a device instead of the War Powers Act to intervene against Venezuelan financial interests. Okay, this is one thing. The situation in Nigeria, you know, this is, if you look at Africa, there is this invisible line that runs across Africa between the northern Muslim population and the southern Christian population. You can see that in Sudan, which was divided on that basis between Khartoum and Juba. And you can see it also playing out now in Nigeria, where certain ISIS populations and terrorist organizations are able to hide out among the general population. This is an area in the far northwest of Nigeria.
Sokoto state, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it has no financial interest whatsoever. This was just simply based on rumors that the Christian population was being attacked by Muslims, that the United States took action in collaboration with Nigeria, however.
Yes.
Because Nigeria has no interest in having the northern part of their country occupied by Muslim terrorists that are right on the borderline with other countries in that region. ECOWAS economic interests are very much affected. Nigeria is the second largest, maybe the first largest economy in all of Africa. It's South Africa and Nigeria. That's the two poles for economic interest in Africa. So if the United States shows support for the Nigerian regime, the government, not a regime, but a government, to try to rid themselves of this threat of Muslim terrorists in the north, I'm sure that that would be much appreciated by Nigeria. But we are not the United States, we're not the United States, we're not the world's policemen. And it's impossible for the United States to stretch itself everywhere there seems to be some sort of an apparent conflict. There's a political dimension to this too. It appeals to its Christian nationalist base. Yes. Christmas Day, I saved the attack for Christmas Day, says Trump.
Of course, it's well timed given that there was a Christian holiday going on last week.
From his perspective, it's well timed. For the people who were killed, I think it's a little unfortunate.
Yes.
But I think that there's no question that there is always trying to show his base that he is the man who will protect the Christian majority. This is like 15th, 16th century crusade kind of a approach.
Right.
So, I hope it's like a one-off. Nigeria, as I said, is a huge economy. It's very important for the African continent as a whole, as well as the United States. I hope that in that specific instance, Venezuela, we see what's happening. I think the war power, when Congress reconvenes, there's going to be a long, hard discussion about the extent to which the president can act unilaterally against any perceived threat. Congress, and now we're coming up on an election year. The midterms will be coming up this year. It seems like politics is every day, so it's not like there's a special time for it. But we'll see. The War Powers Act is something which the United States has always said has to be voted on by Congress. But Trump has acted unilaterally on many, many places and in many ways. Some good, some bad.
And sometimes it has led to Donald Trump fighting the courts of the United States of America on certain issues that, they don't meet eye to eye on certain factors that affect the image of United States of America.
Trump's attitude is, I'm going to do what I want to do to stop me if you can.
Of course, yeah. He has been leading America for the last 12 months in this very rhetoric. I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes. I know we were discussing about Venezuela and the U.S. position on Venezuela, and there has been an intense global response in this manner. I would want to bring out how China has reacted. China's permanent representative at the United Nations criticized the U.S. military buildup near Venezuela and warned it threatens peace and regional stability, accusing Washington of violating international law and the UN Charter. This would be the first, as China, being so far away from that very continent, is providing comment on this factor, mainly because there is huge trade between the two nations. We understand that Venezuela's second most trading partner, or if not the first, would also include China, if not Russia. I want to come to Norman Floyd Barnes in Washington, D.C. I know these countries are, of course, blaming the United States for these activities that they've conducted in the Caribbean Sea. But how far or so do general American people realize that this is an act of war and it's going to continue far longer than the tenure of US President Donald Trump? I want to understand how you felt given that you are positioned in Washington, D.C.
Thank you for the question. This question requires a bit of forecasting. Right now, we're trying to figure out exactly what is the Trump administration agenda. What is their plan? At the same time, we've realized that we are now, our military is now being utilized by the Trump administration to go after countries which the country has, the United States feel that they have interests. Basically, trade, commerce, the topic of oil. Countries, most of these countries, matter of fact, all these countries that we had chosen to submit our military to, has a focus on oil. Even Nigeria, they have an oil reserve. Venezuela has oil. The other countries has interest. So right now, we're trying to figure out exactly which approach this administration is going to take regarding dealing with global issues. At the same time, we have issues in the United States that is coming up for 2026. The prices of everything is rising. Healthcare is rising. Small businesses are now going without insurance because it's beyond their cost. They can't afford it. So right now, we are trying to figure out exactly what is going on with the Trump administration and what is their plan. What is their long-term plan or making America great again? And what does that really mean?
A very astounding take on the regards this issue on U.S. position between U.S. and Venezuela. Of course, this year we'll have to see the U.S. engagements as a whole. Earlier on this year, we've seen Israel and Iran at it, like the war had gone on for a 12-day war. That's what they're calling this year's event between Israel and Iran. And I've seen active participation of the U.S. forces upon Donald Trump's order. They had gone in and they had taken out almost 3 nuclear facilities. So that was the climactic event of the year. I do have some breaking news here. Iran's president has publicly declared a notion of full-scale war with the West that includes United States, Israel and Europe, citing past strikes and ongoing tensions. Of course, these are political and rhetorical escalation than confirmed open warfare, but it heightens regional instability. So I want to come back to the previous event as I was talking about. That we've seen U.S. participation, a war between 2 Middle Eastern regions. That does open up a lot of questions as there is a ceasefire in place, but will there be an opportunity or will there be a chance in the coming year that we see these hostilities being renewed?
That is actually my fear, is that Israel has signed on the bottom line and then immediately erased it. And that there'll be an increased tension between Israel and Gaza, Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Syria, that just simply unable to control the situation in the Middle East. Iran, of course, has always been sort of like the arch enemy of Israel. I certainly hope that there's not a reaction again by the United States on behalf of Israel to deal with Iran. We are not the globe's peace policeman. If we don't have a vested interest in our own security, and very clearly stated, the American people have a hard time wrapping their minds around why are we involved in so many of these remote places in the world where we don't have a strategic interest. Norman mentioned that as well. We're all over the place. And yet it does not seem as if there's a pathway forward. What is the plan? As Norman pointed out, what is the plan? Where are we going? You know, and will the United States simply become sort of like a protector of Israel's interests in the Middle East, as opposed to being an independent sovereign state who has to like arbitrate between all of these governments at the United Nations and elsewhere? So, you know, I think we've overstretched our role. We're spending an enormous amount of money doing so,
right,
and with little to show for it.
Thank you so much, Mr. John Dalton. Of course, Ladies and gentlemen, production is instructing me to go for a short commercial break, but after the break, there are more interesting stories that I'll be presenting with me and also my panelists. Do stay in touch and as we go for a short commercial break.
সারা দেশে লাখো মানুষের কঠোর কর্মতৎপরতা ও নিষ্ঠায় এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন 16 কোটি মানুষের হাতের নাগালে। দীর্ঘ 30 বছর ধরে বিশ্বস্ততা ও দ্রুততার সাথে সেবা দেওয়ায় গ্রাহক সেবায় এখন শীর্ষে। বাংলাদেশে গ্রাহক সেবার সাফল্যের পর এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন বিশ্ব বাণিজ্য কেন্দ্র সিঙ্গাপুরে। আপনার যে কোনো পণ্য সিঙ্গাপুর থেকে বাংলাদেশে বুকিং এর জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন। এসএ পরিবহন প্রাইভেট লিমিটেড, লজিস্টিক্স পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস, 22 রবার্টস লেন, সিঙ্গাপুর 218302। ফোন 0065 629 24900। বাংলাদেশ থেকে সিঙ্গাপুরে পণ্য বুকিং এর জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন ঢাকা সহ দেশের যে কোনো 80টি শাখা কেন্দ্রে। এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস, আপনার সেবা সব সময়।
Welcome, Grand Palace Hotel, Dhaka. A majestic lobby blending timeless elegance with modern design. Experience 5-star comfort in suites and rooms. Sophisticated fine dining restaurant. Crystal clear swimming pool for ultimate relaxation. Modern gym and serene spa.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to International Affairs. I'm your host Shamsulam Pantho, and today we are joined by John Dalton in the studio as well as Norman Floyd Barnes in Washington, D.C. through Zoom. I want to now take to the segment regarding regional stability and regional political events that will shape peace and, of course, understand the trade between these nations. I'm, of course, talking about Myanmar. It has begun a general election first since the February 2021 military coup that ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. She's, of course, being held inside Myanmar. And of course, these votings that is being taken place inside are, of course, between the military-controlled neighborhood and not, of course, within the rebel armed group that are fighting. But this time around, we've seen many of these vocal critics are saying this is a sham election, as they have ignored Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the NLD. I want to begin with John Dalton. It's our neighbor from Bangladesh. We must understand what kind of electoral process will be returning back to Myanmar, how they can understand their own benefits from getting from the control of the military that's been controlling since 2021. I want to begin with you, sir.
Well, the pressure is on them to hold an election, and they promised to do so. One can characterize it as a sham election because nobody in the controlled Arakan areas or anything else are going to be participating in this election. And Aung San Suu Kyi's political party will not be participating in this election. It is a show, like a show election, like a show trial they used to have in China. This is a show election to conform with international pressure to have a free and fair election, and it will be neither one. The military will resume power, no doubt. But because it's a huge army and a huge player on our southern border in Bangladesh, you have to watch it very, very carefully. And any kind of a destabilization in that country will have political and economic effects here as more and more people cross over the border and enter into Teknaf and the southern region. Is it the year of the showdown in Myanmar? I don't know, but it is certainly something that we have to watch very, very carefully. And they have always been a protege of China.
Correct.
And again, China seems to have places that they have direct interests in controlling the timber and also the precious metals that are available in Myanmar. So I'm just simply thinking, I'm thinking that the consequences of the election are more important than the election. The consequences are like, what will be the fallout from a renewed conflict between all of the areas that are looking for freedom and liberation with the central government?
Correct. And it's not just Myanmar that are going through, say, a revival of a democracy or a revival of a regular running of a government in charge of the country instead of a military government that is led by the junta right now. But I want to come to Norman Floyd Burns. We know that Thailand and Cambodia has shared hostilities for the last 3 weeks. And after weeks of clashes along the border, Thailand and Cambodia agreed on a ceasefire starting late December 27th, yesterday. Of course, the fighting had killed dozens and displaced hundreds of thousands. The ceasefire is now monitoring underway. This is, of course, a neighboring country to Myanmar. Of course, these are the nations that build up the global south, if you would call it, if not Southeast Asia. And they all are contributing to the global markets from RMG to various sectors that they contribute to. We also know for a reason that Thailand is a tourist hotspot for all those who reside in Asia. So getting into a conflict with a neighbor and, of course, tarnishing the image of the country is, of course, of utmost importance. I want to come to Norman Floyd Burns. You see, we're talking about South Asia and how these elections, if not these wars or conflicts between minute issues, are causing entire economies and entire communities to be displaced internally. This is a huge scale issue that I want to bring out. I want to understand how you felt about this matter.
Yes, it's quite ironic we're talking about Thailand and Myanmar and the whole region of South Asia. Actually, my son and his wife is planning a trip. Actually, they already scheduled to go to Thailand mid January. So hopefully this conflict will be resolved by then. It is a tourist destination. Matter of fact, that whole belt, that whole region is slated for tourism. I think that the core issues has not been addressed. They keep having these flare-ups because they have not been able to communicate exactly what they want to do and how they want to deal with it. So we have these skirmishes which are going to continue to go on back and forth across the border until they decide to sit down and resolve it. China is support, yes, of the countries in the South, or I call the South Asian region. The United States approach to this is now we're going to let these small countries, these other countries, deal with their own issues. We'll act as a mediator, but not like as Sir John Dalton said. We're not going to no longer be the enforcer, the global police, and Big Brother put everything together. Yeah, we'll bring you together, but you're going to have to sometimes sit down and work these things out. If not, you're going to keep seeing these skirmishes, these battles, these back and forth cross border type situation continue into 2026, 2027. So the results of that will be an economic disaster because if you're fighting, no one's going to come to your region. If you want to do tourism, how are you going to guarantee safety for your people and economic empowerment? So they have to come to a reason because they can't survive fighting each other. That is not the solution. It's not the answer. So we're seeing these off and on. I'm fighting you today, tomorrow. Well, let's talk about it and calm down, and then something else happen again. They have to come to a conclusion because the whole region of South Asia is going to be affected by what's going on. And you know, Bangladesh has an election coming up hopefully in February. That's going to shape how things are positioned, what approach is going to happen. How do we get along with the rest of our neighbors, countries next to us, close in the region? They have to really decide on which approaches they're going to take because everything now affects the next thing. It's a regional issue. It's not just a country by country issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norman Floyd Barnes. I want to come back in the studio with Mr. John Dalton. As we were hearing Norman Floyd Barnes, there are multiple issues that pertain to not just Bangladesh as well as our immediate responding South Asian neighborhood. And as he was saying, these small countries, when they go into a fight or when they go into a skirmish or a conflict, it does affect other markets that they're not necessarily, if not, they're very flourishing in. And we know we've seen Thailand, a lot of flooding happened in southern Thailand that has battered the country. And at this very time, they are planning on strikes on Cambodia. So all of these issues, as well as understanding the petro trade between these two neighborhoods, and as well as the involvement of Laos. And I know that because of this war, trade has been severed to a certain degree. But this time around, they understand that the majority of the people in both of the nations have been displaced. It has gone into a problem that has been affecting both the sides. Hence, they have installed on, if not, they have issued a joint statement from the meeting of the Third Special General Border Committee, the GBC. So this was taking effect from yesterday, and under this, a ceasefire has been gone. But we've seen how the two sides, project power, very soft project powering. One of the sides, I'll give you out a news story from a couple of weeks back. One of the sides of this war was at the border playing ghostly growl sounds in an attempt to make sure that the opponent was scared in a different psychological sense. So there are these aspects between these small skirmishes. I want to understand, given all of this ceasefire and then renewed tensions and then ceasefire, because this would be the second ceasefire in less than a couple of months before the initial ceasefire that was mediated by US and Malaysian sides as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a little micro skirmish. Norman is correct that it affects tourism. It's this is a little tiny border skirmish in an area where a temple is in dispute. Is it in our territory, or is it from a Thailand's point of view, or is it in Cambodia? And Cambodia restricts access to it sometimes, and Thailand becomes offended, and then we have this border skirmish. This is not the first time this has happened. It's probably the first time that it has led to such massive response by Thailand in that area, but it is a common occurrence. Glad to see that there is a ceasefire in effect. Mostly the ceasefire means that Thailand will stop shooting and dropping bombs and doing aggressive behavior on the border. But all of these things, when they're reported, have an effect of destabilizing markets and destabilizing trade and destabilizing the people's sense of security about whether they're going to invest in that area, or even whether, as Norman said, whether his son and his wife are going to go to that area. So all of these effects, all these micro battles, when they are reported, have a outsized effect on economic interests. And it's sad in a way because it reflects the country's reluctance to take these skirmishes, these border issues, to the United Nations on their assumption that the United Nations does not have the power or the authority to intervene and bring about any kind of stabilization. So when there's no referee, you can guarantee that these countries are going to take matters into their own hands to sort it out, as opposed to relying on the United Nations to try to solve some of these problems, or SARC, or some mediating group. And so countries feel as if, well, we don't have a legitimate arbiter of these problems, so we'll solve it on our own.
A wonderful observation from you, Mr. Dalton. I want to thank Norman Floyd Barnes for joining in today. I believe he's going to be cut off, but I wish your son and his wife a lovely vacation towards Thailand. I hope that goes smoothly. Thank you for joining today.
Happy New Year, Norman.
Yes, Happy New Year as well. I want to change the discussion topic for today. Let's have a look at Middle East. We've touched it very briefly earlier on today regarding Iran and the US tension, of course includes Israel, but let's focus on Israel inside the Gaza Strip. We've seen the record number of violations since the ceasefire took place. Israeli attacks have killed at least 401 Palestinians and injured over 1,000 Palestinians as of recent. And of course, Al Jazeera has been tracking independently using various media norms to understand this upcoming, or if not continuing, fight. we've seen a type of different logic. The heinousness, the vast implication that it had before the ceasefire, that has gone down. But the killing hasn't stopped. Every now and then we will continue to hear Israel's ceasefire violations. It not needed to be Gaza. It can be southern Lebanon. It can be a rival faction in Syria. It can, of course, be across the border from Jordan inside Iran that they have done. In order to wipe out Hamas representatives, they have attacked Doha. These are all the recaps of what Israel has done in the year 2025.
Yeah.
Given that they use this example set in 2023, October 7th attack, that's how it began. And today we are approaching the end of 2025 and they have not changed their tactic. I don't see the IDF coming out and said that we will respect this ceasefire and we will not let anyone get harmed. I want your position.
Well, let's go back to 2023, okay? There's absolutely, when the history of this event is written, 50 years from now, 25 years from now, the event on October of 2023 will show that the IDF was asleep at the wheel. The IDF was not protecting the borders of the country effectively. And as a consequence, this massive invasion of Hamas and others who were frustrated came into Israel and committed these heinous crimes, unforgivable crimes, rape, murder, decapitation, you name it, okay? But the reason why that was so widespread was that IDF was not in a position to defend its border, defend the Israeli border. This embarrassment has occasioned the response that we see now, with 3 members of the coalition cabinet that are in the Netanyahu government, okay? Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and Katz are all people who are so anti-Palestinian. It is an obsession with them. It's a psychology with them. They simply are so angry at being exposed as failures that they are exacting revenge on everybody. Babies, raping people, raping men. Televised events of this. The soldiers are engaged in this kind of an activity.
Right.
You know, this situation really can never be resolved as long as there is this deep-seated hatred by certain segments of the Israeli Zionist government that are projecting this kind of actions on these majority of the Gaza population. Now, Hamas is a major issue, okay? Hamas was there, the Muslim Brotherhood was there, there were several of the Qassam Brigade was there. When I lived in Gaza, they were there then. There was always border tension between, sometimes I couldn't go across into Israel because of the situation. But this action by Israel is so disproportionate to the removing Hamas. There has to be some reconciliation, some arbiter who has the courage to stand up to Israel and in its current form and tell them that this has to stop. They can no longer be given a green light to sort of sign off on a ceasefire and the next day can go back to bombing. So, you know, I don't know who has that courage. As you say, Netanyahu is going to Washington. He will probably be given the opportunity to speak to Congress. He'll phrase this as an existential threat to Israel. It is simply impossible for anybody who's a humane person to look at the situation in Gaza, what's being foisted on those poor people, and say this is a symmetrical battle. I mean, this is like a Gaza has become a punching bag. Israel can bomb them, go in, do all kinds of activities totally contrary to the rules of war and to the Geneva Conventions. And it seems, again, back to my friend the United Nations, nobody seems capable of intervening to bring about some kind of a peace. The work that's being done by the United States to try to construct this security force is to be commended. But once again, it's like nobody wants to sign up for that under the current situation when there's an active war.
Of course, from what I understand, that there is no representative from the Palestinians, but like the fierce voice that we had in the past. We can look at Yasser Arafat.
Sure.
He had a very big, loud voice, and everyone those who were in support of the recognition of Palestine did support Palestine back then. But today, if you look at Mahmoud Abbas of the PLA and why he could not join the UNGA 80 earlier on this year, all of these stories come together to understand the relationship between the stakeholders in this event. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, there are more updates that I will be discussing here on this show. But before that, we must go on another short break.
Perfect venue for corporate events, weddings and parties. Seamless and secured. Elegant and eye-catching design. Indulge, relax, discover the first 5-star chain hotels in Bangladesh. Grand Palace Hotel Dhaka, 22 Kakrail, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Welcome to Grand Club at Mirpur 10 Dhaka. Elegant spa and wellness facility for ladies and gents. Play pool and snooker in international standard billiard zone. World-class gym facility with exclusive equipment for man and woman. A restaurant of delicious local and international cuisine. Fully air-conditioned building with spacious banquet, car lift, sky view rooftop restaurant, all in one. Grand Club Limited, Mirpur 10, Dhaka.
কি এমন জিনিস যেটা সব
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the last segment of International Affairs. Of course, I am Shamsul Alam Pantho, your host, and in the studio we have John Dalton, who is of course commenting on the worldwide issues that have been discussing over the last 40 minutes or so. But we were talking about Benjamin Netanyahu. You know, one of the things that is going to change in America, I know this because I have been there very recently. We've seen an immigrant mayor running for New York. He's going to be taking office from January 1st. That is just around this week. It's very latest. And then we see Benjamin Netanyahu, he's being convicted of corruption charges in his own courts in Israel as well as the International Criminal Court. All of these pressures against him, including the fact that Mayor Zoran Mamdani also does not meet eye to eye on issues that come back to those who mentioned Smotrich, Katz, as well as Benjamin Netanyahu. He doesn't see eye to eye on them, but he does have a very big Jewish population that support his campaign or has supported his campaign. So once again, I want to understand, how do you get away with genocide? Or what is the formula to get away with genocide? Like, for that to happen, should the US be your friend? Or, you know, people will come and go. History will relocate someone else in that position of power. Or that's how its history has been written, from Genghis Khan to Mughal emperors to those before them. It is always changing. Power is never static to one chair. It will move and shift within time. I want to understand. I know it's a very broad topic that I've put on your plate, but how do you see this?
Well, it's a very interesting topic, of course, because, you know, the actions by Israel is the predicate for anti-Semitism in the United States. It shouldn't be that way, because there are enormous number of very, very wonderful, intellectual contributors to American economy and American culture and American life who happen to be Jewish. And welcome to them. There's more Jews in the United States than there are in Israel by far. But the anti-Semitism that comes into Israel has to do with, which comes into the United States, has to do with the actions of Israel. And it is not, it's destabilizing in the United States on a social, cultural basis, while on an economic and political basis, the United States and Israel are still joined together in this alliance. But the American people themselves, many, many segments of the American people, are beginning to sort of divide themselves on an issue which they should not be doing, on a religious, cultural issue. And these anti-Semitism on campuses, where the United States government led by Donald Trump has attacked Harvard and Penn and Cornell and universities on the theory that they are anti-Semitic. They're allowing anti-Semitic protests to occur. I mean, nobody raised those issues when I was in college and there were anti-Vietnam protests going on. And so, having lived through the 60s, this defense of Israel at the expense of the social fabric of the United States, to me is uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable to see it happening. Because, as I say, I went to a university which had a large Jewish population, and it's just unfair to the resident population in the United States to have these radical pro-Israel bodies leading the way against the United States Constitution and creating, I think, fear and against all of the great contributors in the United States, which have won the Nobel Prize, which have done so many good things for the United States. But this regime, Netanyahu and his cronies and his thugs in Israel are causing consequences that are unforeseen in the United States and will go on for many, many years.
Of course. One of the things that I actually did forget I forgot to bring this up on discussion when we were talking about Israel. The people in Palestine, they have not just been bombed or families displaced, they have been destroyed, to be very specific. But not only so, we see that severe weather patterns have been taking lives of common Palestinians. We've seen heavy downpour of rain, children dying from conditions such as hypothermia. So once again, I want to focus on whatever that has happened in the globe regarding climate change. We've known that during Christmas, just over the weekend, there's a very powerful situation. Atmospheric river storm hit California over the Christmas period, causing historic rainfall, widespread flooding and mudslides across both northern and southern parts of the state. I understand this is a time that everyone is going into the holiday season, and of course gatherings of friends and family from across the 50 states of America, and everyone's in a holiday mood. But who are responsible to come to the society level to help out those who are affected? I want to get a comment from you from this regard, as it happened so recently.
Yeah, well, of course, the state will be the first response, and I think that the state is well positioned to do that. They'll do the best they can. In addition, Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City will also respond very effectively. You remember, of course, that with the Doge attack that occurred in the United States the first half of last year,
Right.
That FEMA has been cut back, and also the NOAA weather systems were not as active as they should have been to predict this kind of a storm.
Right.
But of course, you know, this is going to be a good lesson, in a sense, that when you try to address an issue globally of global climate change, as opposed to United States climate change, that once you localize this, I think we may have a much better chance of dealing with the effects. We know that the effects here in Bangladesh are a certain way in the south, particularly among other places. But I'm beginning to lose faith in any global solution that really just amounts to an opportunity to go on to a meeting and discuss theoretical issues and then come back and do absolutely nothing. And so COP30 was a complete bust. All the COPs have not produced anything that was supposed to have been done. We need to focus, I think, in Bangladesh on Bangladesh issues, in the United States on United States issues as much as possible. Localize and come up with a solution, put some money behind it, not count on like massive green financing. Get in the trenches and fight the battles that are here. and confront them directly and make sure that we're not suffering here because some guy in Australia who pledged $2 million didn't give his pledge, so now nothing gets done here. Who cares? We have to solve the problem here. Forget the global solution.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. John Dalton, for your comments regarding this very recent issue, as well as I thank Norman Floyd Burns for joining us earlier on, as well as our viewers who are joining us and supporting us almost every day for the success of this program. As I draw closer, I want to let all of our viewers know that December 28th is significant for endangered species because it's the anniversary of the Endangered Species Act, ESA, being signed into law by President Richard Nixon in 1973, a landmark U.S. legislation preventing extinctions and protecting habitats. Ladies and gentlemen, that was it for today. I shall see you all tomorrow.